Ramlet al-Baida. In Arabic, the name means white sand. It is, or it was, Beirut's last public beach. A stretch of Mediterranean shoreline where Beirutis of all backgrounds would come on weekends to swim, to breathe, to remember what normal life felt like. This week, an Israeli airstrike hit Ramlet al-Baida. 8 people were killed. 31 were wounded. But here is what the headlines buried in the second paragraph, or didn't mention at all. The people on that beach were not soldiers. They were not Hezbollah fighters. They were not military assets. They were displaced families. People who had already fled their homes, from southern Lebanon, from the southern suburbs of Beirut, seeking temporary shelter in hotels and apartments along the waterfront. People who had already lost everything once, and had come to the sea because the sea felt safer than the rubble they'd left behind. Let's establish the context that makes this strike so devastating and so damning. As of this week, over 750,000 Lebanese civilians have been displaced by Israeli military operations since this phase of the war escalated. That is roughly 15% of Lebanon's entire population, forced from their homes in days. Simultaneously, approximately 1 million Israelis are in shelters or displaced from northern communities due to rocket fire. The Lebanese displacement has followed a brutal pattern. Israeli evacuation orders come sometimes with hours of notice, sometimes with minutes. Entire residential neighborhoods in southern Beirut's suburbs, Airstrike, Burj al-Barajna, have been ordered empty. Where do you go when you're told to leave with 15 minutes notice? Where do you go when you don't have a second home, don't have family in an unaffected city, don't have money for a hotel in a capital where hotel prices have tripled since the war began? You go to the waterfront. You go to the beach. You go where the buildings are taller and newer and the blast radius of an airstrike feels, irrationally, survivable. That's where they were. At Ramlet al-Baida. Families with children, elderly people, people who had lost everything and were clinging to the edge of the city, hoping that being near the sea meant being safe. This was not the first Israeli strike in central Beirut. It was the third since this phase of the conflict began. The previous strikes had hit a luxury hotel in central Beirut, killing 4 people including, according to BBC reporting, Iranian nationals staying as guests, and targeted a residential building elsewhere in the capital. But the Ramlet al-Baida strike was qualitatively different. The beach and its surrounding hotels and seafront residences had become, in the weeks prior, a de facto displacement zone for the urban dispossessed. NGOs had documented families sleeping in hotel lobbies. Aid workers had been distributing food along the waterfront. Everyone knew this was where the displaced were concentrated. 8 people were killed, 31 wounded. Among the dead and injured, no confirmed combatant role has been established for any of them. Over the past week in Lebanon alone, 83 children have been reported among the almost 400 killed. Over 700,000 are displaced within the country. Health facilities in southern Lebanon are overwhelmed. Aid corridors remain unsafe for humanitarian convoys. These are not statistics from a declared war zone where combatants fight combatants. These are statistics from what the UN would classify as a civilian population under siege. Lebanon's government has not joined this war. Lebanon did not choose this conflict. The Lebanese state, fragile, bankrupt, still rebuilding from the 2020 Beirut port explosion, finds itself hosting a proxy battlefield between Iran-backed Hezbollah, the IDF, and the expanding US-Iran conflict. The country is being punished for geography. Here is what this story is really about: attention asymmetry. When a missile hits a military base, it leads the broadcast. When a ship burns in Hormuz, it trends globally. When Trump says something on Truth Social, it generates 1,000 articles in an hour. But when 8 people die on a beach in Beirut, when 31 people are wounded at a waterfront where displaced families were huddled together trying to survive, it gets 400 words in the middle of a longer article about geopolitics. The Ramlet al-Baida families don't have press offices. They don't have spokespeople. They don't have lobbyists in Washington or think tanks in London writing white papers about their suffering. They have their stories, and the stories are mostly untold. We will not show you the graphic images from Ramlet al-Baida, not because they don't exist, but because the people in them are not symbols. They are people. And people deserve more than to become content. What they deserve, what 750,000 displaced Lebanese deserve, is for the world to watch, to name what is happening, and to demand that the distinction between a combatant and a displaced family on a beach be not just a legal technicality, but a moral line that no military in the world can cross without consequence. Ramlet al-Baida. White sand. 8 dead. 31 wounded. Hundreds of thousands homeless. Someone's war. Everyone's shame.